Thank you everybody for joining this webinar today by RDI Worldwide on the topic of how ChatGPT will affect HR. I'm really glad to be your host today. My name is Gordon Dudley, CEO and founder of RDI Worldwide, based here in Seoul, Korea. And as I make this introduction, I would like to warmly welcome everybody who's joining from all around the world, the different countries who are joining. Thank you for being a part of this session. If you are on the LinkedIn live stream, thank you for watching live there. And to everybody who is here with us on Zoom, once again, a very big thank you for being with us today. If you are not yet following us on LinkedIn, please do so, because this session will be there for your review later on. This session will be recorded for you to take a look at later. Today, we are going to be addressing the topic of how ChatGPT will affect HR. And if you already know, at RDI, we are helping global companies to attract the best possible talents. And so it's very interesting for us to try to see about this incredibly fast-moving topic, which has really grabbed the attention of the entire world. And also, I think it's important for us working in HR to also try to move forward with the latest technology. For that reason, we wanted to put together this session for you today. And to do that in the best possible way, I have tried to pull together a panel of diverse and very varied panelists from both their background and the sectors that they represent. And so through the course of today's session, we will hear some of their perspectives and insights about how they are already using ChatGPT, where they see the potentials for ChatGPT in relation to HR and their business, and also some of the latest developments of ChatGPT and the AI integration within the workplace. We're going to have, first of all, a panel discussion where I will invite each of the guests to speak. We will then move into a broad, open discussion around the topic. And finally, we will keep some time for Q&A. For anybody who is a participant, you will find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please do click that and submit your questions. We will try to get through as many of them as we can towards the end of the session. So without further ado, let me introduce very briefly our panelists that we have with us today. First of all, Divya Singh, who is the co-founder and CFO of Vivity AI, which is working within the application of AI in the industrial uses, such as real-time detection and also automation. He will be giving us some of the technical aspects that we can see on the benefits of that. So thank you, Divya, for joining us today. We also have Lauren Denny, who is Koala's Global Talent Director based in Australia. And she's the Global Talent Director for Koala, which is an online furniture retailer, but they are bringing tech into the home. And so it's really great to be able to get some perspectives as they have been advancing out beyond Australia into other markets. And we'll be really glad to hear Lauren's perspectives on that. Then we have Betty Lowe. Betty is the People and Culture Manager at Slassify. Slassify is a SaaS-based startup based out of Singapore. Betty herself is from Taiwan, but actually based here in Korea, like myself. And Slassify is focusing on EOR and payroll services. So we will be able to hear about some of the HR tech which they are looking at today. Then we have Albert Shafiev. He is the General Manager of El Mecca. Albert is originally from Uzbekistan, but he is based here in Korea as well, working for Elmeca, which is an innovative Korean startup focusing on medical devices, specifically with applications in suction for patient care. And my fifth panelist for today is Nare Shin. She is the HR manager at Mazars. Mazars is one of the world's leading international audit, tax, and advisory firms. And we have known each other for a few years. And Mazars is also trying to perpetuate a really good working culture, and hence why it would be great to hear her perspectives as well. So thank you all for agreeing to be panelists here, and I'm sure that everybody will agree we have a great diversity of backgrounds to hear from. So let's first, let me ask my first question, and I'm going to point it towards Divya. Now, Divya, at Vivity, of course, you are almost at the forefront of the latest AI. That is the very nature of your business. But maybe ChatGPT it's become super popular, but there might be people who have heard about it, are maybe a bit curious, but don't really know what it is. So maybe can you kind of give us a little brief overview of how you see it and why, rather than any other particular tech trend or innovation, why it potentially has so much more importance for all of us?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you again for having me, Gordon, and pleasure to meet all the panelists, and welcome to the audience. Yeah, so ChatGPT has obviously taken the world by storm, and I thought perhaps it's good to get a bit of perspective on the technology that underlies ChatGPT and maybe the recent historical developments that has led us to this critical juncture. So if you look at the NLP, which is the categorization of technologies under which this falls, natural language processing, that's been a fairly, it's a few decades old by now. Obviously, the big sea change that happened in NLP and in general in AI technologies happened when we had the advent of deep learning in 2011 and 2012. And with that, we started to get these different types of structures, whether it be for vision AI or whether it's for NLP in terms of natural language. And one of these very popular models turned out to be something called recurrent neural networks, RNNs. So these were kind of state of art from 2012 to, let's say, 2017. And the limitation of these models was that they were sequential. So you couldn't really have large models that can handle a lot of different variables. And the breakthrough that happened that led ultimately to open AI succeeding with ChatGPT has been the formation of transformers, right? So when you look at what ChatGPT means, it means generative pre-trained transformer, right? So transformer is an architecture that, in fact, Google came up with, and they, in fact, integrated that with their search engine. So even before ChatGPT became famous and people started using it, you've already been using large language models and GPT type structures within the internet, right? It's in the fabric of Google search, right? And what OpenAPI did is they took this model and they took it to the next level. So the limitation that Google had was that they were using something called supervised learning. And I don't want to get into the technicals too much, but it means that you're labeling the data and feeding that into training the model. Now, what OpenAI did was they took the transformer architecture and applied unsupervised learning. So essentially, they were able to take the whole corpus of, in fact, the internet, all of Wikipedia, and they just fed that into the model, and the model essentially trained itself. So that was the key breakthrough that happened here. And of course, enabling that was the computational architecture that helped them get there. And that's how they started with ChatGPT 1, which had about 100 million parameters. And now today, finally, in ChatGPT 3 and 3.5, you have about 175 billion parameters that have been trained on almost 45 terabytes of data, right? So what I'm trying to get across is the complexity of these models has really grown exponentially, and so has their capability. And now we are at this juncture when you compare, for example, ChatGPT 3 and 3.5, based on ChatGPT 3. And now we have ChatGPT 4. They're at the level where they're beginning to surpass and actually generate natural language just like humans. So for example, ChatGPT 4 has been able to pass the bar exam. It's able to score 90th percentile on GMAT, right? 99 percentile on verbal. So essentially what these models can do for you is they can help you with all kinds of different tasks. They can help you, write letters. They can help you rewrite. They can help you summarize. It's a general purpose model that can even help you program. And I think that's why we are at this sort of dawn of generative AI, where it's only going to get better as we go. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Divya. I think that's a really good snapshot view, and definitely I'm sure there's a lot of people who maybe they haven't even tried it yet themselves, but they have heard a lot about it, hence their curiosity to join in this session. And I think that is a really good starter. Thank you. And I'm curious later to know a little bit more about how you might be using ChatGPT yourself as an AI company within the company, maybe potentially for any HR applications. Let me come to Lauren now. I know that Lauren, you've been with Koala for a number of years, and you have been working with multiple regions. And that Koala specifically focuses really intensively on the culture of the company and a kind of people first strategy. What does that mean for you now with ChatGPT applications and opportunities? How have you already begun to kind of dip your toe in the water and see any benefits from it?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, again, thank you for the invitation to participate on the panel today, and welcome to the audience too. But I'll break down my answer and that kind of into two parts. That one, in how Koala and the company wide has kind of started to approach ChatGPT, and then equally from a people and culture and team and overall kind of perspective. So it's very timely. We last month actually had an internal company-wide session that was run by our CTO, and she was just addressing through what it is, the potentials and some of the risks, and some basic guidelines for how we should be using it internally, and obviously from both especially the IP and information sharing kind of perspective, which I'm sure we'll get into in some of the risks. But yeah, so there's initial kind of conversation that we want to start across the business. We do make furniture at the end of the day, so it's not something that's going to help us make furniture physically. But at the same time, there's a lot of benefits that a lot of team members are already seeing, and especially from a content creation and kind of brainstorming and yeah, just bouncing, almost as another additional team member when you don't have one, right beside you, because maybe we're not in office all the time now. So yeah, ways in which, especially from a people and culture team perspective, we've started to look at this is really, again, going back to content creation and refinement. So as talent and recruitment, we've looked at it for writing or revising job descriptions. We've used it for looking at skill sets and competencies in terms of kind of performance models. We recently redid our job architecture, and even sorting through the kind of career leveling and giving it names and descriptions that were specific to Koala. We really try to qualify a lot of the internal kind of frameworks, and so it's funny how quickly ChatGPT starts to understand, and with obviously more and more prompts and specific questions, but for instance, is spitting back answers that almost are, starting to sound like our tone of voice, and with emojis. And so it's really quite interesting how quickly and how specific, but how accurate we can kind of make it, and have it be applicable to some of the things that we're doing internally for the teams and overall employee experience.
All right. Well, I mean, there you have it. If you're in a company that is already, not even talking about ChatGPT, then you're already behind, because there are companies like Lawrence who have already had entire town halls about this subject. So that's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing that, and definitely want to get into more of the uses that you mentioned there within an HR context. Let me come now to Betty. Now, Betty, your company is essentially a tech startup within HR. So that obviously kind of is the combination of what this session is all about. How is it for you as an HR people and culture manager at Slassify with regards to ChatGPT so far?
Yeah, so as a fully remote team, ChatGPT definitely helps in many different perspectives. I'll also separate the answer into two parts. So for my own role as a people and culture manager, it's been helping me from recruitment to processes. So I do think for HR professionals, it's really important to coexist with AI instead of seeing it as a threat, and see it as an assistant instead. One of it is because its ability to memorize, and in a globalized workplace, now HR professionals don't need to memorize all the different, or the research on all the different regulations and labor laws, and they can really help with that.
I think, unfortunately, Betty might have just exited herself from the webinar. I'm sure she will be back. I was about to say that's absolutely fascinating to hear that even ChatGPT has HR regulation applications, because that is definitely, when I talk about recruiting HR people in Korea, that is one of the the most important points that people are looking for. And so if that can broaden the use within it, then maybe that will be a really good thing. And I think Betty is coming back to us now. Betty, was there anything else that you wanted to comment on there?
Yeah, I'm really sorry about the slight technical issue earlier. So just to add, our company is also many different departments are also looking into how they can ChatGPT can assist with their work. And as a HR tech company that provides EOR service globally and global payroll, it can also really assist with that. We're also looking to how to optimize responses that user can ask about compliance questions, and we can use the AI to assist them with that instead of manual work. Yeah.
So users, by which you mean your clients. So this is an external type of
the user for our platforms. Yeah, but there's still in the planning stage, so there's a lot to be worked on. But I think it's a very exciting opportunity to see how AI can help all sorts of different positions, and for us as a company as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you raise a fantastic point that there are, of course, both internal company opportunities as well as very much external ones as well. Let me move on to Albert. Albert, you have not been with Elmecca too long, but you have come from essentially a kind of a finance background. But you are trying to sell your products over into international markets. It is a high-tech product in itself. So what are some of the perspectives that you have with regards to ChatGPT for your company and your business?
Okay, so first of all, I think I'll try to keep my answer general because we have audience from different industries. Just from trying to experience it by myself, I think also first general application point I can tell is like you notice right away that it feels different from Google in a way that when you use Google, you use keywords and you look for a specific answer to your specific question quite often. But the main difference with the ChatGPT, it feels like you have a conversation with someone, right? Even though it is simulated. And for some people, this is a better way to work, right? So that is one point. Another point is for other people, it will also help them to understand what keywords they should use, right? So it doesn't mean that they are not going to complement each other, right? So you can learn a bit more about the subject through the ChatGPT, and then you can use the keywords in Google more efficiently. Now, that being said, I will also give a bit more specific example about the startup, and because I'm coming from the VC background, a lot of this, there are similarities that can be in which ChatGPT can be used for VC and for a startup as well at the same time. So from the startup point of view, it also depends on your stage. So if you're early on, you can do some idea that you have, run it by, have some analysis on it done. You can ask for advice on how to build your pitch deck. Those are like the very simple and quick applications, and you will get a very clear breakdown. And then you can again have a follow-up conversation on it, which is unique. On top of this, if you're more on a later stage, when you're doing, for example, fundraising activities, you can also scout your investors. You can just ask, right, what investors are kind of interested in products that we have or in the industry that we're in, and you'll get like a list that you can follow up on and talk to. And you can even have like a live role play conversation. You can tell to ChatGPT, why don't you be a VC and I will pitch to you, ask me some questions, right? So this is also one good way to prepare for these kind of conversations. And also a couple points that I said can be useful for both. So just market analysis, right? Trend analysis. You can check who are the main players that are producing certain products in a certain industry. What are the main changes that were done to those products recently, right? What are the kind of trends in those industries? And that can be used both for startups and for VCs when they do due diligence on them. And I guess another one is a bit more specific example, but a lot of the times if you are manufacturing a certain product, you will have suppliers. And you can also use a tool to research about your supplier, right? So maybe it can kind of dig some information that you initially didn't know about your potential partner, right? And this can be done also for the VC when they're doing the due diligence. So that would be my short answer. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Albert. I think you've touched upon definitely one of the unique aspects of ChatGPT is it's by its very name, it is chat based, and also on the training aspect, which I think also we can get into more detail. Let me now come to Nare. Now, Nare, you're at Mazars. It's an accounting firm, and you know there's definitely been some suggestions that there are certain applications of ChatGPT which might really change the entire viability of certain jobs. I'm not going to go into that within an accountant's or auditor's perspective now.
Okay.
That's maybe for another time. But from your perspective as an HR manager of such a company, what do you see as some of the opportunities that ChatGPT might bring you?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me one of the panel for this interest topic, Gordon. And as a manager, I think firstly, we can improve HR department by reducing administrative tasks with ChatGPT. But you know, actually, many companies have been already focused on making their organization more efficient by automation projects to streamline low-value tasks so far. So I think as a result, HR professionals are being demanded to focus on high-value tasks by performing planning and strategy work. So to do this, many global companies, they have created job positions such as HR business partner or HR consultant to resolve organizational issue and support businesses through various methods. But the emergence of ChatGPT, I think it makes it more possible and more efficient, just like an engineer or doctor with the latest technology tools so that they can provide better services. So HR organization that quickly adapts and applies this kind of technology like ChatGPT, they can perform more high value projects and services within the organization. So in my personal view, AI become capable of handling data and administrative tasks and more complex problems. So HR department would be able to shift their attention toward more employees' motivational and psychological development aspect. So, an organization like Mazars, where people are all asset of our businesses, this kind of aspect are getting more and more important. So just for my personal case, in the past, I have mainly focused on the numeric data for quantitative analysis, and it is easier to generate reports and we can save time. But I'm now more interested in having more employees interview and creating program to care our employees and development program and new policy strategy. So for this work as well, ChatGPT can also help us for qualitative analysis as well. From the text-based data, from various interview and survey for the sake of planning and strategy work. So I think it is good to upskill ourselves for more valued project.
Yeah, no, I think that's a absolutely great point, that the single biggest opportunity for HR is to get away from the administrative and less value-adding tasks and really get at the core of the people-based work, which can be the biggest value differentiator in any organization. I mean, I remember when I was starting my career, I was highly praised for how beautiful I could make my PowerPoint presentations look. This was at that point a highly prized skill, but I think clearly this is no longer. ChatGPT definitely can do this significantly better and significantly quicker. Let's get into the real HR applications of this, and we have obviously some direct HR representatives, and I want to kind of take a step-by-step look at the recruitment process and where you might have already examined or explored some opportunities within using ChatGPT, or maybe where there are some risks, of course. So, I mean, usually recruiting starts with the recruitment marketing, right? It starts with the company having an employer brand and putting itself out there and trying to identify who might be a target. So, question to Nare, Betty, or Lauren, essentially, where do you see that opportunity and in the early stages of the recruitment process?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it on first. I think, already, for instance, LinkedIn, has been talking about a feature that will be coming out to help, and whether that be with the personalized messages to headhunt candidates, or in kind of better search criteria and finding those candidates and putting together kind of pipelines. So that'll be very, very interesting. Going back to, again, just job descriptions, how well they're written, what kind of audiences, they're attracting. And then even for hiring managers, when they're thinking about interview questions or even application questions. So I have a personal example, which at Koala, we started to see some ChatGPT answers for some of our application questions. And it's always quite telling when, we get a very generic, but, in third person kind of answer that clearly, hasn't had a lot of thought behind it besides a copy paste. And so, yeah, I think that's quite interesting from almost an epic human fail rather than a ChatGPT fail, for candidates to kind of use it as a crutch or be lazy with it. But yeah, it's still applying that human lens at the end of it, and really, especially with kind of hard to fill roles, needing kind of really full context for hiring, and especially in connecting the candidate with the company at the end of the day and making sure that's the right fit.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A couple of people who I have asked recently, have you given ChatGPT a try? And yeah, I gave it a try, and it wasn't very good, wasn't very accurate. And essentially what you've identified there is the person said, write me a perfect interview answer, and they got something. But the beauty, of course, with ChatGPT is that you, and I think you also mentioned it yourself, Lauren, about making your content more koala company oriented. And that's how you can iterate any response that you get by ChatGPT by putting it into a certain tone, write it in a certain way. There's been some good examples where you can, take a kind of an opinion stance on something, and then that further enhances. And then after several iterations, and I heard even, of course, you have identified that very obviously written text. So then, of course, now we come to having to use ChatGPT, and there are now other tools to make it less detectable as AI generated. So that's then another kind of filter to put into. Nare, Betty, would you like to jump in on it?
Yeah, I like how you mentioned about the tone. I personally experienced how well it actually revises itself after you make suggestion. So maybe the first draft, it's a bit stale or too formal. And then I could ask it to be more friendly, or vice versa. So I think it's very interesting how well it adapts. But us as human, we also need to practice to write a good prompt, pretty much to get what you want. And other than recruitment itself, I think as a people manager, it also helps with other processes because you're dealing with people, and that comes with emotion. And us as HR professional, we are human as well. So we all have emotions, and having AI, having ChatGPT also helps to take that sometimes the emotion or impulse out of it, and kind of force you to take a step back and make sure what you say to people or what you're going to present are as professional as you mean to be, with the best intentions. And that also relates to employer branding. It also helps with other context, like documentation, and it just goes on and on. Yeah.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, I think as Betty, Lauren, they already share well the recruitment process, and I would like to mention some kind of risk in the recruitment by ChatGPT, because our candidate, they have also ChatGPT, so they can really make fast their CV. And Gordon, you already shared about the article of cover letter by ChatGPT. So I'm thinking to have a kind of workshop of the interview skills of the manager of each department, because nowadays, through the candidates using ChatGPT, we need to verify their true experience and true motivation, So I think in the recruitment process, the interview skills and, face-to-face, the true story can be more important.
I think that's a great point. Speaking as somebody who works with a lot of hiring managers on a lot of recruitment projects, I can only please encourage companies to do more interview training in order to help the process go more smoothly, and also enhance that candidate experience. Some of the risks there that you mentioned, and perhaps Divya, I can kind of direct this to you with regards to the risks of the information that we put into ChatGPT. Probably what we put in content-wise is going to be much more in quantity, much more than what we put into Google. Therefore, what are some of the risks that companies might encounter with putting so much into ChatGPT? Are we feeding the machine to then further get that information fed back to us later on and sharing, or give us some insights on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we already alluded to some of the limitations of the model and ChatGPT. So I think I'd like to highlight perhaps three things that come to mind. First of all, it's a pretty well-known fact within the community that ChatGPT is trained with data that goes only till I think November 21 or the end of the year. So obviously it doesn't know that the Ukraine war is going on, or there's a lot of different news that is actually not in its corpus of knowledge. Sure. Right? So it cannot really come back to us with any realistic data on those particular topics. So that's one. Second, I think we also need to understand that unlike a search engine, it doesn't really cite the sources, right? A search engine, when you search in Google, it gives you the actual web pages or the sources. In case of ChatGPT, at least till now, they haven't really been very clear, right? Because as I said, they trained this on a very general corpus of data, right? So it's all of Wikipedia. There's actually a very open source, well-known corpus that's 60% of ChatGPT. That's pretty much a web crawler that crawls the whole internet, and then they cleaned up some of the data and fed that into GPT, right? So that's how it knows all of these different things that you're always wondering where it comes from, right? But then sometimes it tends to do what is called a hallucination, right? So it might come up with factually, in fact, incorrect data that's actually it's saying that quite confidently, right? Okay. So that's some of the artifacts in the machine.
We've all met people like that, haven't we?
Right, exactly. And lastly, I would say the fact of bias in the training data, right? So that also you need to be cognizant of that, and that can be managed in different ways. For example, OpenAI has done something like a guardrailing process where the output of the model is actually screened by another model on top of it.
Okay. Is the bias risk factor a two-way street? There was a famous case where somebody asked ChatGPT, name me the world's most famous philosophers. The response came back, the entire list was men. And so then, of course, the person questioned, oh, why is the list only men? Okay, right. It revised it, it then included women, but still the list was only of Europeans. Again, why are there only Europeans on this list? It revised it again to then include other nations. So there is that element of automatic bias that comes through, but with some of the most recent versions, there is now a very good emotion detector. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking that perhaps in the context of interviews, we have an interview feedback, and somebody says, oh, they were very confident, and their perception was the person was confident and not nervous. The other person said, well, maybe they talked a lot, but I didn't really think that was confidence, and there can be that conflict. Maybe ChatGPT can kind of enhance that and give an even better accuracy with that kind of emotion. Is that also a possibility?
Perhaps. I haven't seen sentiment analysis per se as a capability that has been talked about in case of ChatGPT, but it's very interesting you mentioned this. I was just reading about, and I think we might come into this, we might have kind of skirted around this topic, is vertical specific models, right? So the limitation of models, general purpose models like ChatGPT, is that it's trained on a very general corpus of information. But what if you were to, let's say, take the whole set of accounting principles and all of the language around that, and then train a model on that, right? So I think in terms of, yeah, so there's ways to get around it. I think it all depends on how you, I agree with you. I've actually used ChatGPT on my own, and quite often you can ask it a question and then you drill deeper and then you sort of try to inflect something and then it picks up on that, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that might just be emergent behavior. I haven't really seen any specific explanations as to why that happens.
And this vertical integration or the kind of almost industry specific type of ChatGPT, is that an opportunity for companies themselves to be, literally that area, accounting GPT, legal GPT
Sure.
in the future, or is this also have internal applications as well?
Oh, so are you asking that, is this a fertile area for new companies to come up with tools? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, definitely. I think it's actually probably one of the most leading edge investment areas, right? I mean, ChatGPT itself is offering plugins and an app store, but everyone again knows its general purpose nature. So now we need frameworks and tools that can actually, for example, you were asking some of the other participants, what if I wanted something that was XYZ company flavor, right? So perhaps in the future, there are tools where you can actually take all of your data in the hard drive, which is, I don't know how many gigabytes, and then feed that into a GPT model. And then that GPT model would potentially be able to get the kind of the flavor of your company. And number two, also get the fact patterns right in terms of how you think and so on within the organization. I think there's a lot of different potential use cases there. Obviously, this kind of a use case is very far away.
Mm-hmm.
I think in between you'd have cases like, for example, Bloomberg recently released Bloomberg. I think it's called Bloomberg GPT. Actually, I was looking at it just a few minutes ago, and it seemed amazing, right? Because I was an investment banker and an investment analyst, right? So if it's totally up to date, right, I can ask it, okay, write me an investment memo for investing in Coupang. And it would actually write you the whole memo and give you the framework, right? Or it could give you the framework for another specific company. So I think there's a lot of interesting, powerful use cases out there. And I think there's a lot that's going to happen in the space in the next few months and couple of years.
Okay. Moving on to an internal use potential, which is kind of a little bit about what Nare said about moving away from kind of admin-based tasks, which is the use of a chatbot or an AI assistant within the company. I think up until now, my personal experience across any consumer type of website is that a chatbot has always been a hassle. It's never smooth. It's never really that helpful, and that you always get asked, was this helpful? And it's almost continuously no. But if there is a kind of a more enhanced capability, then potentially for the application of HR when getting voice of employees, or even an HR help desk, or some even, of course, whistleblower type of scenarios within a confidential kind of setting, that potentially could have a lot of good upside from HR perspective. Would that be something that you could envisage your company implementing? Betty, shall I let you go first?
Can you reword can you tell me again the last part of the question?
So could you see your company into implementing a kind of HR chatbot within the company to try to take a lot of that HR work within it?
Yeah, so for our own platform, we do see, for our own company, we do see that happening. But it will be, it's the work in progress, I think. So it will take some time. I don't think it will be implemented like next month. It will take a lot of iteration and changes to make that as good quality as we want for the users, user experience. But for me internally, for people management perspective, I was reading about how it can also help with people management in terms of like mental health or employee handbook, things like that. So that will take a lot of weight off I guess, startup HR's shoulder, to have that assistant on the side to help you go through like complex topics, let's say building a handbook from scratch if you're a one-man department like me. So I think different perspective, it will be very helpful to have that as a chatbot in the company for internal use and for our users as well.
Albert, would you like to comment about the potential for such a use within your company?
I would say for our company specifically, because our number of employees is, let's say, under 50, so I don't think we will get huge use out of that. But for companies that have probably thousands of employees in different locations in different countries, I can see this being useful for sure.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that? Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, bringing it back specifically to recruitment, even, you know, I've seen it via the kind of sourcing and screening, and especially when it comes to, for instance, high volume roles like customer service, who also are utilizing chatbots, you know, even within their daily work. You know, could be interesting just to get through that initial kind of screening process. You know, first it was video interviews. Now there's different companies like Paradox or Hubert that are coming up with these chatbots that build into applicant tracking systems, and that's quite interesting.
Yeah, very much so.
Add on to, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just, following Lauren's comments, I just want to bring back to also recruitment and HR. There's also a function that you can paste your job description and the CV of your candidates, and they will let you know from a non-biased way to analyze if it's a suitable candidate. I think that's interesting for HR to make sure, like extra step to make sure that we're not judging a candidate with bias, especially nowadays. The DEI is like a buzzword, and our company is also like very focusing on that. So we're trying to make sure that there's no bias in any way when it comes to selecting the right talent. So I think that will be something we'll look into even more. So yeah, I think that will be a really helpful way to do that.
Okay. Well, I think that is a good point to move into the questions. I know they have been stacking up already, so thank you to everybody who has put a question, both on LinkedIn and also in Zoom. We'll try to get to as many as we can. So the first one that I'd like to come to is a question about the opportunities with translation and using ChatGPT. I mean, definitely, you know, being based in Korea, I have had frequent use of translations online, and none of them have really quite hit the mark, especially with a heavily context-based language like Korean. It's very difficult to get a decent level of translation. Does anybody from the panel have experience using ChatGPT for translation purpose?
I personally have experience with that, but for work, my marketing team, because they produce weekly blogs about like compliance or anything HR or remote work related. So it's been a huge tool for them to make things more efficient, because they have to translate into, you know, Chinese, English to make sure all the copies are more smooth. And they've informed me that it's been a huge help to make it like save more time for them. Of course, it doesn't do the whole job for you. You still have to, you know, edit it and make it smoother, like more like a native speaker, like a human. But it's definitely way better than a let's say Google Translate or something like direct.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can add my personal experience that I've tried it, and at least Korean to English, it gets it to a business level, almost usable type of level. The other way, English to Korean, less accurate. But I guess it's something that we need to watch and see how that develops as it does get better and better. Another question here, which is directly towards Betty and also Nare about recruiting. So, I think we've touched on it a little bit already. But the question is, can you elaborate how we can use ChatGPT recruiting process in the real world as a recruiter?
Okay. I think the very first thing can help is the job description. After you write the job description, you can make you a suggestion based on what you're looking for. You can make it more playful, less formal. So the tone side is a huge help. So you don't have to scratch your head and spend hours thinking if it's the right style that you want to represent your family. Your company. And the other thing is remote. For the Boolean search string. I don't think at the moment it's the best tool to use for generate a whole Boolean search string for recruiters. But I think it's a good way to use it to generate some keywords to suggest to your own search string to kind of, I guess, change it to have more specific search. Because as recruiters will are familiar with how to use the search strings and come up with different ways, but having a second tool to come up with additional things to add, you always come up with new results, and I think it will really help. And another thing is I can also suggest how to filter the results on LinkedIn. You can tell it what country, what you're looking for, and it will give you like very specific filters to use. Yeah.
Okay.
And the last thing I think is how you approach and pitch candidates. You can also paste their profile. It will give you some suggestions on how to approach that person in a way that they feel it's more personalized. So yeah, I think those are the main things regarding to recruitment. That's been helpful.
Great, thank you. And Nare?
Yeah, I also similar. I have similar opinion, and actually from the job description, if you open a new businesses, actually HR might not understand well some kind of job position, so we can have some help from ChatGPT. And yeah, last week I also tried, and I developed the job description with ChatGPT, and it helps me also by grade as well. So simple job description and more high level. So it can, save time to communicate other department as well. And also ChatGPT can help us pre-screening of the CV. If you have a lot of CV, it can help pre-screening. And if you at Mazar, we've got phone interview session, and we need to summarize our phone interview contents, and we need to analyze with other department. And maybe, I think ChatGPT can help us for the text analysis as well, to make decision and to save time, and for the better communication and upscale our recruitment process. So yeah.
It's also great for coming up with interview questions for recruiters.
Sorry?
Yeah. It's also great for coming up, preparing the interview with that's
true.
Questions. I think it's been so helpful, coming extra. And it also helps the HR to prepare the hiring managers for like second interviews or final interviews if they're less experienced with recruitment. Yeah.
That's some great points there. Thank you. Let's move from the recruiting side into more of the HRD side, and of course we have potentially a HR perspective and a senior management perspective as well. The question here is, how can ChatGPT be used to upskill and manage talented employees? I think this is a very interesting one for a lot of people, no matter their industry. Albert looking very pensive. Lauren smiling. Divya smiling now. Okay.
I mean, I would say probably a lot of this is very case specific, but can probably work together to create certain boundaries where it will be easier to evaluate employees, right? To kind of maybe score them, create a certain framework together, and then try to utilize that framework in the actual work. And then once you know which employees are kind of performing better, depending on the framework you set, you know who to focus on at least, right? So I don't know how far it can go, but at least to sort them out, yeah, it can help.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a good point there. If I can just add, I mean, ChatGPT can inform us of the skills needed to do a certain job. And so if we can then integrate that within the company context, which would be specific to your particular organization, we can then evaluate slightly better if somebody is not necessarily performing as well as they could be, or if there's an element of their skill set which they're missing, in which case that would be the area to focus on. And we could then develop some kind of training program. Maybe ChatGPT can suggest that too, where we can then develop a performance plan for that person. Lauren, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just my 2 cents. I think it's massive for learning and development, and especially because you're thinking about, huge amounts of information, and if it can be narrowed down to a more specific domain, and specific to, let's say, manager training. Yeah, there's lots of potential to build out, entire kind of decks that you can then utilize and apply to the business, which, yeah, is really interesting to see where that might go.
Lauren, you have teed us up perfectly into the next question around different areas. And I want to go into the different geographic areas that we might be covering in our respective organizations. There's a question about whether there is different levels of adoptability in different areas, or any specific examples or trends which are unique to specific markets. Has anybody in the panel come across any of those?
I mean, I'll say from Australia, we're usually early adopters of technology. Then,
or you are not? Just want to check that what you said there.
I think we are.
Okay.
That there's, a general stereotype that a lot of startups will use Australia as a test bed because consumers here are open to new technologies, and as well as, it's a small market, to kind of beta or pilot in. So I would say that, I've heard a lot around this topic, and would be, similarly to the US, it's definitely something that, we're keeping a close pulse on. But
anybody else? Okay, we've got a lot of questions, so I'll move right on. Betty, a question for you about the use of ChatGPT for payroll process.
Payroll process.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
your area.
I think for payroll process, it can be used, but at the moment, I don't think you'll be implemented right away, because it also takes a lot of, I guess, manual work to double check if everything is, like the finance team, the payroll team need to make sure everything's thorough. So I don't think at this very moment is it's perfect enough for us to fully rely on it. So
An accuracy
I think
point of view.
Yeah. I think providing calculation for, let's say, a severance package for this country, for a certain country would help. For example, Taiwan or Korea, it will give you a perfect example of how to calculate that. But I think for like a big amount of company payroll for internal use or for our clients' employees, I personally don't think it will be used right away. But it would be a useful tool even for our finance team to ask some questions and for our users too.
Thank you. Divya, I want to direct a question to you now. Somebody says that they understand and appreciate the pros of GPT, removing emotions from certain aspects in order to perform tasks. But have you encountered any cons of this technology lacking human aspects of emotions or empathy? Does the platform find and relay the gray of what most may deem black and white scenarios in your experience?
Yeah, I think it seems quite subtle. You know, we briefly touched on sentiment analysis. I think when we were discussing a few minutes earlier, and I was curious, so I just checked, and it actually ChatGPT does classify emotions as positive, negative, or neutral, right? And I imagine as these models get more sophisticated, and second, as OpenAPI and the companies that deploy these models become more comfortable, just perhaps from a legal liability perspective, right? They would start to be a bit more open in allowing the usage of such sentiment analysis and actually using that in sort of the phrasing and so on, right? But I think just to clarify, the question also points to the fact that not being emotional is a good thing. Is that right? At
yes,
times, right?
At certain times, yes.
At certain times, yes. And I agree with that, right? So a lot of uses that I've used for ChatGPT in the past is something that Albert touched upon is sort of frameworking, right? Or just having it give me a list of things, and it's really helpful to think about, right? Or I feed it a legal contract, right, which is very specific, and it's very sort of emotional context free, and then I can ask it to make it even more neutral or gauge it for sort of weaknesses, right, and so on. So I think both have their uses, and I think the tool is adaptable enough that you can actually use it in the right context if you ask the right questions.
Got it. Thank you. And a question directly for Albert, knowing that you have had previous experience with a VC. So this question is asking about if the market analysis done via ChatGPT and put down as a source as ChatGPT for internal or external use, how much credibility do you think that this would get perceived by internal or external clients? What do you think about that?
Okay, so I think something that was mentioned earlier that is important also to mention now is that there's a data cut-off that is 2021, right? Which means whatever data we get is very limited. So just based on that, I think credibility will not be high. That being said, assuming that it gets more updated, right, and we're in the perfect scenario, then probably the credibility will go up to a certain level. And also, I would say you should use it as a reference. The way you can do it is, again, it's a tool, right? You should not like mention it specifically. What you can do is you can use this tool to research the market, right? So you ask questions about the competitors and you get the list, and you ask for the trends, you get the list, and then you actually go to Google and you use this list, right? So something I also mentioned earlier is basically different tools work together and help each other. So you just kind of combine them. And by having more understanding from the conversation with the ChatGPT, you can have better keywords and you will know where to go in your search, right? So your search becomes more oriented and more targeted, and that in itself can help, right? So you utilize one tool that can help utilize another tool that will help you to get the market analysis that you're looking for. That's how I would approach it personally.
Good, thank you. I appreciate your multi-perspective response. And we are coming towards the end of the webinar session now. I would like to end with a specific HR question, and it's a broad one. So hopefully we can get a few of the panelists to comment on it. And it's a relatively simple one, so feel free to develop it in whatever way you think best. But the question is, how do you think ChatGPT will change L&D, learning and development?
That's a good question. I think all of us are thinking, digesting the question a little, how to answer. But from the top of my head, I think it's definitely gonna help and also change how it is. I think one of them is how we evaluate people after the training is done. Because if they use, because that comes to the risk about the education side. I think either Nare or Lauren mentioned earlier. If they just rely on ChatGPT to come up with an answer, we really don't know if they're fully educated on certain topics. Let's say we come up with a training on DEI, and we do a survey afterwards, and to understand if everybody's on the same page regarding that matter. But it will save us as the HR professionals' perspective to prepare those training, plan everybody's professional path in the company. But for the employee side, I think there's always there'll be a kind of controversial side about how it will be in the future. But I don't have a clear answer about that now. So I think we'll do test runs this year. And I think all of us are going to have a different point of view next year.
For sure. I think it's a good point. Nare.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure it is the right answer, but I think group training by company and training by ChatGPT. We need to think. We need to divide this side, I think, because I think if we provide some training by company side, each person has different understanding. And, but ChatGPT supports their understanding personally. I think ChatGPT is a tool, learning tool, very personalized tool to help each employee. So we can harness ChatGPT for this side. But yeah, it's just on my mind. I think I will divide some training side. On our own project and ChatGPT side. Yeah, so
in parallel.
This is my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense to develop in parallel. Would anybody else like to comment on that?
Not exactly to that question specifically, but I think it's very important for us to learn how to use the tool in the future for new employees or anybody that's new in the workforce to at least know how to use it and not like totally reject it. Otherwise, you put yourself in like a disadvantaged position because we're all evolving. I don't think 30, 40 years ago we'll be doing like remote work, and now it's very common. So as the workforce, as the world evolves, we need to go with it as well.
But at Mazar, we treat very technical, side, like law and audit, etc. So actually, in Korean version, maybe ChatGPT is developed very well, but we cannot depends on the ChatGPT with the technical training. So maybe in the future that can be possible. For now, I don't think I can start with ChatGPT training for our technical side at Mazar. So yeah, this is my
I think maybe for like the more basic training for employees, like the basic standard rules, those will be very helpful.
That's true.
The details, you will still need a human, like a manager, to do the actual.
But other side, maybe we can use ChatGPT for training needs analysis and their development side. Maybe we can also use analytical analytical tools. So yeah, I think we can use ChatGPT in various ways for learning and development project.
Good. Well, I think that we are pretty much out of time now, so I'm going to wrap things up. You know, I didn't create this session because I'm an expert, far from it, because I was very curious to learn more about ChatGPT and how it is really putting ripples across all areas of the economy and society and business. So thank you to everybody who has joined in today for asking questions. Thank you to all of my panelists for joining and sharing your perspectives and insights. One of the highlights that I learned about this concept that maybe ChatGPT can be that additional team member. We don't have right now, but we can use that ChatGPT team member in a variety of ways, and it will continue to get better and better. So I think that's a great food for thought, as long as it doesn't have any hallucinations. So let's hope that we don't have too many of those. Thank you to everybody. This webinar live stream will be available on the RDI YouTube. We will be sharing that as well as available on LinkedIn as well. Once again, thank you to everybody for joining today. I've been your host, Gordon Dudley. Looking forward to seeing you again on another future RDI webinar. Thank you.